Hey, this is Anand and welcome to another edition of the 1500 plus SAT Masterclass. Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to punctuate supplementary information or non-essential clauses in a sentence. Okay, so this is part of the grammar section of the SAT, which they call Standard English Conventions, and this specifically comes under the boundaries and transitions domain. Alright, so this is actually a pretty simple concept. Okay, you just need to be able to identify what and where the non-essential clauses are and add the appropriate punctuation. All right, so there is no expansive set of rules that you need to memorize. Okay, and this is a very easy 20 to 30 points on the SAT. Okay, and learning this also has an additional benefit. There is another section in grammar called subject verb agreement, which is probably another 2 to 3 questions on the SAT. And the harder questions in subject verb agreement is going to use, or rather make very liberal use of non-essential clauses. So you're being able to identify where the non-essential clauses are is going to help you answer those questions as well. Okay, so it's a very important topic, a lot of points. So focus on this, topic. All right. So before I start, right, this is part of a series of videos on SAT grammar. So I've provided a link to the playlist. So click on that link and watch the videos in sequence. All right. And also, watching videos is one thing, but the way that you're going to improve is by practice. Okay. So for practice, go to Just Locked In. I have provided a link to Just Locked In as well. And all the notes for this video, I've provided a link for that as well. Okay. And let's get started now. All right. So what is supplementary information? Okay. Supplementary information is extra information that you have in a sentence. Okay. So the test of supplementary information or this extra information is that you could remove that without breaking the grammar of the sentence, the grammatical correctness of the sentence, or affecting the core meaning or the idea that the sentence conveys. Okay. So supplementary information is also called non-essential clauses or non-essential information or parenthetical information, parenthetical clause, for example, or expression. So parenthetical is something that you would add in parentheses, in brackets. So typically what do you add in a bracket? Something additional, right? You don't strictly need it. It may convey useful information, but that's not the core message or idea that you want to convey, right? So that is what you would put in parentheses. Okay, so that's why this is parenthetical, right? And that's all non-essential information. So we'll look at examples, right? So here, this could be a word. Okay, for example, in this sentence, the mural admittedly took years. So the mural took years to create is the actual sentence, and that's the core idea. Admittedly is like the additional flourish. Yeah, I mean, I must admit that, it took years to make. Okay, so this is parenthetical. Okay, so this is supplementary information, or it could be a phrase. For example, asteroid belts in many systems sit between rocky planets and gas giants. So the core idea is asteroid belts, they sit between rocky planets and gas giants. And in many systems just means that, hey, this is not just in our solar system, but in other systems as well. Yeah, so that's a message that it conveys, and this is strictly parenthetical, right? I mean, the core idea is not in this phrase, all right? So here, the whole clause, the artist who trained in Florence unveiled her mural. So the artist unveiled her mural. That's the core idea of the sentence. And the fact that she trained in Florence is really additional information. I'm not saying it's useless information, but it is not useful in the context of this sentence or in the, I shouldn't say context of the sentence. I mean, it's not useful from the perspective of what this sentence wants to convey. Okay, so it's not essential. I shouldn't say useful. It's not essential. Okay, so therefore, you could say that you could remove this, okay? And this is non-essential clause, right? So supplementary information. So what are the punctuation rules, right? So all supplementary information, right? I mean, it must be enclosed by matching punctuation on both sides, okay? For example, here, 2 commas. The artist, comma, who trained in Florence, comma, unveiled her mural. Or you could use 2 dashes or M dashes, right? So the artist who trained in Florence unveiled her mural, okay? So this is again, you're just separating it out and just saying, hey, this is additional information. Parentheses, the artist, in bracket, who trained in Florence, unveiled her mural. So these are all legal ways of adding supplementary information in a sentence, okay? So why do we even add this supplementary information, right? It is, hey, you wanted to provide extra context for whatever that sentence is trying to convey, okay? And if you want to provide more context, then instead of providing that context elsewhere in a separate sentence, you deliver that context or you place that context right where that sentence would benefit from that context, okay? So you localize that context and therefore you provide it. Like, for example, in this particular sentence, it may be useful to know that, hey, this artist that who unveiled the mural was actually trained in Florence, okay? This had nothing to do with the unveiling, okay? But the point is, hey, providing this context in this sentence is kind of useful because whoever is reading a sentence may benefit from knowing this information that this artist trained in Florence, all right? So how do you find out if a phrase or a clause or a word is non-essential information, right? So perform the lift out test, okay? So we're going to use this lift out test in many contexts, like I said, not just in this particular pattern, but also in patterns like subject-verb agreement, okay? So being able to identify non-essential clauses or non-essential information in general is very helpful, all right? So the way to do that is the lift-out test. So essentially what you do is mentally delete that particular phrase, okay? And then look at the rest of the sentence. Does that make a complete sentence? And does that convey the meaning that that sentence is supposed to convey, okay? With this particular phrase missing, phrase or word or clause missing, okay? Then it is non-essential information or supplementary information, okay? And it also needs the paired punctuation, either a comma or a dash or parentheses, okay? For example, the novel which she wrote at sea became a classic. So the novel became a classic. That's the, so when I lift this out, okay, I'm going to lift this out, right? Then the novel became a classic. The sentence works, okay? And it can survive without this information. So this information just provides additional context. The fact that she wrote that novel at sea, okay? So therefore, this is non-essential supplementary information. Now look at the sentence. The novel that she wrote at sea is the one I mean. Now here, if I remove that she wrote at sea, then it becomes the novel is the one I mean. Now, this is, this is a complete sentence, but in terms of meaning, this is still non-specific, right? You're saying, hey, the novel is the one I mean. This is kind of non-specific. Which novel are you talking about? Okay, so the novel that she wrote at sea, that provides the specificity that this sentence needs. Okay, and therefore, while you can remove this expression without losing the grammatical correctness of the sentence, okay, you are taking the meaning away from it, right? So the sentence doesn't make sense. Okay. Therefore, this is an essential information and not a non-essential information that you can remove. So therefore, you cannot set it off by commas. Okay. So it has to be part of the sentence without punctuation. All right. Okay. Let's do an example here. Asteroid belts are regions that so I'm just going to put that here. Asteroid belts are regions that in many planetary systems lie between rocky planets and gas giants. Okay. So let's perform the lift out test here, right? So we'll take in many planetary systems. Okay. So if I lift this phrase out, then asteroid belts are regions that lie between rocky planets and gas giants. It's grammatically correct, and it also conveys the meaning. The what the sentence wants to convey is that, hey, these are regions that lie between the rocky planets and gas giants. Okay. Well, I actually repeated the sentence, so it's as clear as it can be, right? So that's the core message, or that's the core idea that this sentence conveys. So in many planetary systems, we already discussed the sentence before, right? So in many planetary systems is supplementary information. Therefore, you put a comma here. Asteroid belts are regions that, comma, in many planetary systems, comma, lie between rocky planets and gas giants. All right. So now I'm going to give you some examples of supplementary information, right? So here, this is an appositive or a noun phrase that renames or identifies the noun next to it. And look at it. Australia had won broad voting rights. That makes a complete sentence, and that describes the core idea as well. That is, Australia had won this voting rights. Okay. And this one here, Australia, it tries to define what Australia is in some way, right? A dominion within the British Empire. Okay, so this describes Australia, and this description is not strictly necessary in this sentence. Okay, the sentence can survive quite well without this particular phrase or expression, right? So therefore, this is non-essential or this is supplementary. The signal came from a fast radio burst, a millisecond flash of energy. So here, the signal came from a fast radio burst. So that is what is the actual sentence, and it presents a valid idea. And here, followed by a comma, a millisecond flash of energy tries to define what a fast radio burst is. Right. So some people may not know what an FRB is, and therefore it defines what an FRB is, and therefore it sets off by a comma. And if you observe, this is actually at the end of the sentence. Okay, and therefore there is no pair comma here. I mean, the sentence ends with the full stop. Okay, but you set it off with a comma because it is supplementary information. Okay. You could also use a dash here. Okay, so this would be similar to using a colon. Okay, but I would avoid that use seriously, because when you use a comma, it describes fast radio burst. Okay, so you're just talking about FRBs. However, if you use a colon or a dash, then whatever follows it must describe or must explain this sentence completely, or it has to pertain to the idea expressed in the sentence. Okay, so here whatever follows this is strictly talking about, or it strictly defines what a fast radio burst is. Okay, and that is not what the objective of the sentence is. Okay, the objective of the sentence is to convey the idea that that signal actually came from a fast radio burst. Okay, so therefore a colon or a dash may not be the right use. A comma is the right punctuation here. Okay, let's look at this one. Dr. Osei, a leading marine biologist or a marine biologist, whatever, marine sounds better to me, led the survey. So a leading marine biologist, okay, that is, it's saying who Dr. Osei was or what he did, okay, and therefore this is supplementary information. Dr. Osei led the survey is the actual sentence, and that conveys the idea as to who led the survey. And this supplementary information is really saying who Dr. Osei was or what was his background. All right. Now let's look at these examples. A relative class. Who or which? The artist who trained in France unveiled her mural. Okay. The repeating signal, which likely comes from a magnetar, puzzled astronomers. So the repeated signal puzzled astronomers. So this is supplementary information. Marie Curie studied radioactivity, right? So this is just telling who Marie Curie was. Hey, she won 2 Nobel prizes. All right. Okay, let's look at participial phrase. Okay. It's essentially starting with an ing or an ed form of the verb. So the court decided the case in 1954, declaring school segregation unconstitutional. So this one is participial. This one is non-essential. So the court decided the case in 1954. So that's the sentence, and it conveys a complete idea. Here, the court decided the case, and they did so in 1954. So this is an additional information or supplementary information, which is here. What did that do? Right? What was the impact of it? They declared school segregation unconstitutional. So similarly, the signals surprised researchers, right? So that's the core idea. The signals detected by observatories on 2 continents. So this is adding to signals, right? It provides additional information about the signals, right? So therefore, this is supplementary. Okay. So this has nothing to do with the overall idea of this message, which is, hey, the signals, well, they were detected by whatever, but the fact is the signals surprised researchers. Okay, so that's the core idea. So similarly, the core idea here is the pavilion reopened last spring. Okay, and the fact that this pavilion was built from reclaimed steel is supplementary. All right, so that's supplementary information. Here we have usage of such as, which can also provide supplementary information. So visitors saw details annotated in the app. So this one gives some examples of details. Okay, so that is strictly supplementary information or non-essential information, like such as chisel marks along the torso. Well, is it useful? Is that context useful? Certainly, right? But however, from the very narrow, strict perspective of the sentence, this doesn't necessarily add to the core idea expressed in the sentence, nor is it required for the grammatical correctness of the sentence. Okay. Some forests hold moisture in fallen logs, and this one is really giving you examples of what such forest or where such forests might be found. Okay, such as those in the Pacific Northwest. A few minerals such as quartz and mica form in granite, right? So the core idea is a few minerals can form in granite, okay? And then this gives some examples like quartz and mica are those minerals that can form in granite, okay? So all this is, or they are examples of supplementary information. Okay, so for some general rules, right? So when you have a sentence, I'm just going to use a very diagrammatic representation. I'm not going to write a sentence here, right? So I have a sentence, okay? And then I have this non-essential information or supplementary information, and then this is the rest of the sentence. So when I do this, you're going to have to treat this non-essential information in pairs of punctuation. So either you use commas, okay, or you use dashes, or you use parentheses. Yeah, for example, now I'll write a sentence, right? This video found on YouTube, okay, teaches SAT grammar, okay, or grammar for the SAT, whatever, okay. So this video teaches SAT grammar is the core sentence and it expresses the core idea. Now this is supplementary information, right? So now what you could do is you set it off with a comma. So typically some teachers also refer to this as a comma sandwich. All right. So the sentence is the bread, and this is sandwiched by the two parts of the sentence. Okay. I don't want to say this is the meat. Actually, this is not. Supplementary information is not the meat, or rather, it's not the core idea of the sentence. But you get the drift, right? So they call it a comma sandwich. Or you could also separate this by a pair of M dashes, right? So then this becomes a dash sandwich. Or you could also just put this in parentheses, right? So this video within parentheses found on YouTube teaches grammar, all right? So any of these could be used. Never mix a comma on one side and a dash on the other, right? So you have to look for what punctuation is being used. And this is particularly important from an SAT context, because the SAT is going to have this full sentence written and they'll probably put a blank here. Okay, and therefore, and ask you to choose the punctuation. And when you do, you're going to have to look at how this non-essential information ends, right? And what punctuation they're using, and you have to use a corresponding punctuation here. Okay, therefore, completing the pair. Yeah, so you need to be mindful of that and be aware of that. When you answer those questions. So we are going to do a number of examples, and therefore we will come across these and it'll become more clear why what I said is very important. Okay. You have to, it's just a corollary. So both sides, you have to put commas on or dashes or whatever on both sides, right? So, okay, so these are in general the rules around supplementary information, how you punctuate them. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and look at some examples. All right, so for you to do practice yourself, I mean, of course we're going to do practice questions here, but while you do your practice, and it's very important that you answer questions yourself, not just watch me solve questions or just watch somebody else do questions on YouTube. That's not going to improve your score. You have to practice yourself, right? Just go to Just Logged In and go to Build Skills, Boundaries. Just click on Boundaries, and you can either do question by question, or you can take a timed practice test across all of the patterns in Boundaries. So when you do question by question, you can actually go choose a pattern. Just go to Supplementary Information, and you can practice as many questions as you want. Okay. The other way to do that is go to Pattern Strategies, go to Reading and Writing, Standard English Conventions, and Supplementary Information. So you're going to get all the notes here. All what we discuss in this video is here, along with examples. You can go and hit this green button to practice this pattern. So you'll go to the same question by question practice exercise. I mean, it's the same interface, it's the same set of questions, but you can access the whole practice interface from here as well after reading all about it. Okay, so you have two ways to go access our question bank, and everything is aligned to the way we are discussing things here. Okay, so in addition, you also get section tests, full length tests, and all that. Okay. So now I'm going to go to my bookmark questions, so you can bookmark questions as well, so that you can refer to them later. Okay, any questions you want can be bookmarked, whether you're writing a test, whether you're reviewing a question, or just doing practice. If there is a question that you think you want to come back to later, or you want to refer later because it illustrated an important point or was particularly difficult to you that you wanted to review later, go ahead and click that bookmark button, and you can come here and see it all neatly organized. All right. So we're going to go to boundaries, and we're going to solve some problems. All right. Okay. Let's look at this question. A sound installation fills the gallery with overlapping recordings. The arrangement of speakers, according to curator Jamal Ortiz, is meant to make visitors walk slowly through the room. Okay. So the arrangement of speakers is meant to make visitors walk slowly through the room is the sentence, according to curator Jamal Ortiz. This piece of information here, right? That is supplementary information, and it is already set off by a comma, and therefore we need to close it with the comma, and B is the correct answer. Okay, so we'll just mark B and move on to the next question. Okay, all right. Geologists describe earthquake size using both magnitude and intensity. The scale, called the modified Mercalli intensity, describes shaking based on observed effects, right? So the sentence here is the scale describes, so they use both magnitude and intensity. So there is a scale that uses that. The scale describes shaking based on observed effects. Okay. Now, the scale called the modified Mercalli intensity, that is supplementary information. Okay, because that tells you more about the scale, essentially saying what it is called. Okay, so therefore, you have to set it off with a comma or a dash or a bracket, and we know that this ends with a comma, and therefore it needs to start with a comma. So D is the right answer. So the scale, comma, called the modified Mercalli intensity, comma, describes blah blah blah, right? So therefore D is the correct answer. Okay, let's just click on D and we'll move to the next question. Okay. In 2010, a regional theater converted its stage to LED fixtures. Okay. Technicians programmed clues that shifted brightness during a play, such as a gradual dimming to suggest twilight. The upgrades reduced power use but required extensive retraining for the clue. So actually, if you look at it, the only thing relevant for us here is, I'm just going to highlight this, is this. Yeah. So, technicians programmed clues that shifted brightness during a play, such as a gradual dimming. So, such as a gradual dimming to suggest twilight is an example of the programmed cues, okay, or how it shifted brightness. Okay, so that is supplementary information. So the real idea of the sentence is technicians programmed cues that shifted brightness during a play. Okay, so that is the real that's a real substance of that sentence, right? So therefore we set it off with a comma, so D must be the right answer. So shifted brightness during a play, comma, such as a gradual dimming to suggest twilight. And in fact, I'd probably take a minute to show you how you can actually shift this supplementary information up in the sentence, right? So you could also write technicians programmed cues, comma, such as blah 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 blah, right, comma, that shifted brightness during a play. Okay, so we could do that too, right? So such as now falls within the sentence, and you can set it off between a comma. Put that whole thing in a comma sandwich. All right. So you could do that also. Okay. So let's click on this, check the answer, and let me also remove this. All right, and let's go to the next question. Okay. In the aftermath of World War I, the Habsburg monarchy dissolved, transferring authority over several regions, Bohemia in present-day Czechia, Galicia, split between Poland and Ukraine, and Transylvania, present-day Romania, to newly formed states. So this whole thing here are examples of the several regions, right? And it is already set off by a dash, and therefore we close it with a dash, and this is the only option that has a dash. And this present day Romania also needs to be closed with the because this is all supplementary information or parenthetical information within this phrase, right? Therefore we need to close this, so this one closes it and then follows it up with a dash to close the dash over here, right? So therefore B is the right answer. Okay, and none of these are right. I mean, it's quite obvious. I don't have to tell you why the rest is not the right answer. Okay, all right. Astrophysicist Leela Ortega recently proposed that there's a big sentence here, may explain the abrupt dips in brightness recorded by space telescopes. Okay, so if you look at these options, let's just pick one. Okay, Leela Ortega recently proposed that young stellar clusters, star-forming regions that contain protostars, gas clouds, and dust lanes, may explain the abrupt dips in brightness, blah, blah, blah. So, essentially, this part, the star-forming regions that contain protostars, gas clouds, and dust lanes, that actually explains what young stellar clusters are. It tries to define that or describe young stellar clusters. It clarifies that, okay, what they are. It explains that. Therefore, this is the supplementary information, and it needs to be set off by either a comma, a dash, or brackets. Okay, so having said that, when you look at this, young stellar clusters, comma, we need to close this with a comma before we say may explain the abrupt dips in brightness, but it is missing a comma, and therefore this is not the correct answer. Okay, young stellar clusters, star-forming regions, dash, right, that contain protostars. This is also not the correct answer because this whole thing describes young stellar clusters, not just star-forming regions, and therefore this is also not the right answer. Now, if you look at this one, young stellar clusters, star-forming regions that contain protostars, gases, this is not even grammatically correct. Okay, so therefore this is not the right answer. If you look at this, young stellar clusters, dash, star-forming regions that contain protostars, gas clouds, and dust lanes, dash, may explain the abrupt. So this is the right answer because this whole thing explains, right? This whole thing explains what young stellar clusters are, right? And therefore that supplementary information, we set it off with two dashes, and then we continue the sentence, may explain the abrupt dips. So therefore this is the right answer. Check this, and yeah, it's correct. All right, so we are done with all the questions. Okay, so this is actually a pretty simple pattern. All you need to identify is where the non-essential information is, and then we set it off with a comma, dash, or bracket, or not set it up. We need to enclose it, right? So it's either a comma sandwich or a dash sandwich or within brackets. Okay, so if you use a common parlance in how many people seem to describe it. Okay, that's about it, and we'll see you in a different video. And in the meantime, just go to Just Logged In, go to this particular pattern, and practice as many questions as you can, because the more you practice, you're going to get it better in the test, because as soon as you see, you're going to be able to figure out what the answer is. Okay, and especially with supplementary information, this is also going to be very useful to you when you start working on subject-verb agreement. All right, thank you.